The lavish engagement party sparkled with elegance, the ballroom filled with white roses and crystal chandeliers overhead. All eyes focused on the glowing couple, a radiant bride-to-be holding hands with her successful fiancé. At the entrance, a young millionaire appeared with his mysterious girlfriend, a woman nobody recognized or knew. She wasn't a celebrity or famous model or social media influencer. But just minutes later, the entire ballroom couldn't take their eyes off her completely. Meet Ethan Ward, 32 years old, young tech millionaire who had built his fortune through innovative software development. Despite his wealth, Ethan lived a relatively private life after his painful breakup with Clara Bennett, who was now the glowing bride-to-be at tonight's party. His friends often mocked him. "You're that rich and you still let that girl get away?" Ethan usually stayed silent, just smiling politely to avoid confrontation. When he received the engagement party invitation, Ethan knew everyone would scrutinize him if he showed up alone. They would whisper about the poor millionaire who couldn't keep his woman. So he made an unusual decision: hire a companion for the evening, not to show off, but to avoid being pitied. The woman he chose was Grace Miller, 28 years old, a part-time nurse who lived simply and never tried to impress anyone. Grace hesitated when Ethan explained the arrangement. "Are you sure about this? I don't fit into your world." Ethan smiled genuinely. "I don't need you to fit in. I just need someone real." Grace had been working extra shifts at the hospital to pay off her student loans. The money Ethan offered would help her tremendously, but she was worried about pretending to be someone she wasn't. "Just be yourself," Ethan had told her. "That's all I'm asking for." Grace agreed, but she spent days worrying about what to wear, how to act, what to say. She bought a simple dress from a department store, nothing designer, nothing expensive, just something clean and appropriate. The night of the party, as Ethan picked her up in his luxury car, Grace felt completely out of place. "I don't know anything about your business, your friends, or your ex-girlfriend," she admitted nervously. "Good," Ethan replied. "That means you won't judge me based on old gossip and assumptions." As they drove to the venue, Ethan found himself genuinely enjoying Grace's company. She asked thoughtful questions about his work, listened carefully to his answers, and shared funny stories about her patients at the hospital. She wasn't trying to impress him or flatter him. She was just being herself. It was refreshing. In his jacket pocket, Ethan carried an old photo of himself and Clara from happier times. He had planned to throw it away after tonight, a symbolic gesture of moving on. Before entering the party, Ethan looked at the old photo in his wallet, him and Clara, from when they were still in love. He folded it away and whispered to himself, "Old chapters need to stay in the past." What he didn't know was that Grace would help him write a completely new story. At the elegant ballroom, Clara appeared radiant alongside her new fiancé, a successful businessman dressed in an expensive Italian suit. Guests praised the couple endlessly while whispering when they spotted Ethan arriving with Grace. The murmurs began immediately. "Who is that woman with him? She doesn't look like she belongs here." "Probably just some actress he hired to make Clara jealous." "How desperate can you get?" Grace wore her simple department store dress with confidence, but her genuine smile couldn't hide her nervousness. Clara glanced over with a half smirk. "So you found yourself a companion for the evening, Ethan?" Several guests approached Grace directly with condescending questions. "What do you do? Are you a model? An actress?" Grace answered honestly, "I'm a part-time nurse at City General Hospital." The entire table erupted in barely concealed laughter. "A millionaire dating a nurse? How interesting." Ethan calmly placed his hand on Grace's shoulder and said clearly, "She saves more lives than all of us in this room combined." His words created a moment of awkward silence, but many guests continued looking at Grace with dismissive expressions. Grace excused herself to the restroom, feeling overwhelmed by the judgment and scrutiny. In the mirror, she saw exactly what she was: a working-class woman trying to fit into a world of designer dresses and trust funds. "I shouldn't have come here," she whispered to her reflection. But when she returned to the table, Ethan leaned close and said quietly, You're the only reason I don't feel completely alone in this room. Grace looked around at the perfectly dressed guests, the expensive decorations, the elaborate flower arrangements. Everyone seemed to belong except her. These people have known you for years, she said. I'm just the hired help tonight. No, Ethan replied firmly. These people think they know me. You're the first person in months who's asked me real questions about what I actually care about. The evening continued with speeches, toasts, and elegant socializing. Grace tried to blend into the background, but she found herself genuinely interested in the conversations around her. When older guests talked about their health problems, she offered thoughtful medical advice. When someone mentioned a family member in the hospital, Grace knew exactly which doctors were best in different specialties. She wasn't trying to show off. She was just naturally caring and knowledgeable about things that actually mattered. But the wealthier guests dismissed her contributions as cute or quaint. Clara's new fiancé whispered to his friends, "Ethan's really scraping the bottom of the barrel with this one." Grace overheard the comment and felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Ethan noticed her discomfort and was about to say something when the evening took a dramatic turn. During the toasts and congratulations, an elderly gentleman at a nearby table suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. The ballroom erupted in panic and confusion. "Someone call 911. Is there a doctor here? What's happening?" Most guests stood around helplessly, pulling out their phones to record rather than help. While everyone else panicked and took photos, Grace didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees beside the unconscious man and immediately began checking his vital signs. "I need some space," she called out with professional authority. What happened next would silence every person who had mocked her that evening. As Grace worked to save the elderly man's life, the crowd of elegant party guests stood frozen in shock. "Does anyone know what she's doing?" Someone whispered nervously. "Should we stop her?" asked another voice. But Grace's hands moved with practiced precision as she checked the man's pulse, opened his airway, and began CPR compressions. "He's having a cardiac episode," she announced calmly. "Has anyone called paramedics?" The guests who had been laughing at her minutes earlier now watched in stunned silence as Grace took complete control of the medical emergency. She positioned the man's head properly, checked his breathing, and continued chest compressions with perfect technique. "Come on," she whispered urgently. "Stay with us." After what felt like an eternity, the man's eyes fluttered open and he began breathing regularly again. The ballroom erupted in amazed murmurs. A doctor who was attending the party as a guest pushed through the crowd to assess the situation. "Excellent work," he told Grace professionally. "You absolutely saved his life." That was textbook emergency response. The room fell completely silent. All the people who had dismissed Grace as just a nurse suddenly realized they had been watching a trained medical professional handle a life-threatening situation. The elderly man's wife knelt beside Grace with tears streaming down her face. "You saved my husband. How can I ever thank you?" Grace helped the woman up gently. "I'm just glad I was here when you needed help." As paramedics arrived to transport the patient to the hospital for observation, the party atmosphere had completely changed. Guests who had previously ignored Grace now approached her with genuine respect and gratitude. "I had no idea nurses were trained for situations like that," admitted one of Clara's friends. "You were incredible under pressure," said another guest who had earlier made snide comments about Grace's dress. But Grace remained humble. "Any nurse would have done the same thing. We're trained to help people, not to impress them." Clara watched the entire scene with a complex expression on her face. Her new fiancé whispered to her, "I thought Ethan hired her as some kind of escort, but she just saved someone's life." Clara approached Grace hesitantly. "I owe you an apology. I misjudged you completely. Tonight, you're the person everyone will remember." Grace smiled genuinely. "I just did what needed to be done." Ethan had been watching Grace work with a mixture of admiration and something deeper, genuine respect for who she was as a person. When the crowd finally dispersed and the elderly man was safely on his way to the hospital, Ethan found Grace on the venue's outdoor terrace. "You were amazing in there," he said quietly. Grace looked out at the city lights. "I was just doing my job." "No," Ethan replied. "You were being exactly who you are. And who you are is extraordinary." Grace turned to face him. "I'm still just a part-time nurse, Ethan. This dress doesn't change that." "Good," Ethan said firmly. "Because after watching you tonight, I realize I never want to be around people who value appearances more than character." Inside the ballroom, guests were still talking about what they had witnessed. A society photographer, who had been capturing the engagement party, began focusing her camera on Grace instead of the bride and groom. The images she captured, Grace kneeling beside the patient, Grace comforting the man's wife, Grace being humble in the aftermath, would soon spread far beyond that evening's party. Clara's engagement party, which was supposed to be the social event of the season, became the night everyone remembered the nurse who saved a life. As the evening wound down, Grace received more genuine compliments and meaningful conversations than Clara did. Not because Grace was trying to compete, but because she had shown everyone what real substance looked like. A photographer captured the moment when Ethan took Grace's hand, his eyes filled with genuine admiration and pride. The photo would go viral with the caption, "The woman they mocked became the hero of the evening by saving a life." But for Ethan, the real revelation was that he had found someone whose character matched his values. After the medical emergency, the entire dynamic of the party shifted completely. Guests who had previously dismissed Grace now approached her with genuine respect and curiosity about her work. "I never realized how much training nurses receive," said a woman who had earlier made snide comments about Grace's dress. "You handled that crisis better than most doctors I know," admitted a surgeon who was attending the party. But Grace remained gracious and humble with everyone who spoke to her. Clara approached Grace privately, her voice filled with genuine emotion. "I was wrong to judge you. Tonight you showed more class and courage than anyone else here, including me." Grace simply smiled. "You don't need to apologize. We all make assumptions sometimes. But you didn't deserve the way people treated you when you arrived." "It's okay," Grace replied. "I'm used to being underestimated. It usually works out fine in the end." Ethan found Grace on the venue's balcony, away from the crowd and cameras. "How are you feeling?" he asked gently. "Honestly, relieved that the man is going to be okay. That's all that really matters." Ethan studied her face in the soft outdoor lighting. "You know, I hired you tonight because I wanted to avoid being pitied, but watching you in there, I felt prouder than I've ever felt in my life." Grace blushed slightly. "Don't give me too much credit. I just did what anyone with medical training would do." "No," Ethan said firmly. "You did what someone with a good heart would do. The medical training just made you effective." They stood together quietly, both processing the unexpected turn the evening had taken. "This wasn't what either of us expected tonight," Grace said softly. "No," Ethan agreed. "It was better." Inside the ballroom, the party continued, but the focus had completely shifted from the engaged couple to the quiet nurse who had saved a life. Social media posts about the evening centered not on Clara's designer dress or expensive decorations, but on Grace's heroic actions. Real elegance isn't about what you wear. It's about how you treat people in crisis. The most beautiful person at the party was the one who saved a life. As they prepared to leave, Grace realized she felt more comfortable and confident than she had all evening, not because she had impressed people, but because she had stayed true to herself when it mattered most. Ethan drove her home, both of them quiet but content. "Thank you," he said as they pulled up to her apartment building. "For what?" "For reminding me what actually matters. Do you believe that quiet kindness can silence an entire room? Type I believe if you agree that true character shines brightest during crisis. This story shows us that you don't need impressive titles or expensive clothes to become the center of attention. A millionaire hired a fake girlfriend to save face at his ex's engagement party, but her genuine heart and courage earned the respect of everyone present. Sometimes what makes us truly shine isn't designer dresses or social status, but simple human decency when others need help. Grace Miller proved that real elegance comes from character, not from labels or bank accounts. If you believe that authentic moments of kindness can change entire narratives, share your thoughts below and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us what really matters in life.